and consistent with state and federal law. Labor peace is not forced unionization. It simply levels the playing field. The emerging cannabis industry is a job generator, and we want those to be good paying jobs. The legal marijuana industry added 77,000 new jobs in 2020, and that is during a pandemic. Nationally, the industry supports about 321,000 jobs, and that's growing at a very rapid pace. Studies have also shown that unionized workers enjoy wages higher than their non-union counterparts and pay far less for medical and retirement benefits. Unions also enhance worker satisfaction and lead to higher productivity and lower turnover. Labor peace helps counter the impact of the war on drugs by ensuring good paying jobs for those communities disproportionately impacted. The work unions have done on behalf of workers in the state of Minnesota has led to a culture that values organized labor and the right to organize free from interference. We must continue that tradition. The emerging cannabis industry presents an unparalleled opportunity to build a new kind of industry for Minnesota, one that recognizes the importance unions play and gives workers an opportunity to exercise workplace democracy and improve both the industry and Minnesota communities. Policymakers must embrace this opportunity to build workplace democracy into the fabric of this new industry. In conclusion, UFCW supports an adult use cannabis industry in Minnesota that will create sustainable jobs for families, reward responsible businesses, and ensure that Minnesota cannabis industry is driven by companies committed to making long-term investments in local communities. That is why we urge you to pass HF 600 with labor peace this session. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Next up is Steve Kalina, President, CEO of Minnesota Precision Manufacturers Association. Mr. Kalina, identify yourself and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Steve Kalina. I'm the President and CEO of the Minnesota Precision Manufacturing Association. We're precision manufacturers producing the most complex and critical products in regulated industries such as med device, aerospace, and defense. Being a manufacturer myself, I do speak with hundreds of businesses each year. Some do see positives with House File 600, such as decriminalization and more access for medicinal purposes. However, there are three concerns that I'm going to cover. First, the most important being safety. Some of the most intelligent, talented people are machinists and tool makers that run $1 million machines, making devices that save lives or keep a plane up in the sky. One wrong move can cause a $50,000 repair. One bad product could cause a plane to crash or kill a patient. Allowing recreational marijuana risks workers' safety, millions of dollars in capital, and most importantly, the quality of products that could cost lives. What are manufacturers looking for in an employee? They show up on time, are highly focused, detail-oriented, efficient, and have the ability to react to problems. Ask yourself, would you want someone under the influence producing the life-saving device that goes into your child, or assembling the brake lines in your car? Second issue is testing. So last week, Representative Winkler mentioned there is no correlation between the amount of THC in someone's system and their level of impairment. When asked how the bill would address detection, he mentioned that it will fund police training. That does help, but as a military policeman myself, I can tell you that training for detection is not an objective measurement. Now, place that same burden on thousands of businesses. 80% of Minnesota manufacturers have 50 employees or less. They don't have trained experts to detect impairment, let alone on a substance that is almost impossible to quantify or prove. I hope you'll demand further testing capabilities or risk leaving our employers to fend for themselves when it comes to the safety of employees or potential litigation over product quality or employment lawsuits. Who will be accountable? Lastly, on jobs. One of the arguments is that this will generate more revenue and jobs. I want to be clear, Minnesota does not need more jobs. What we need is an efficient allocation of trained people where they are needed. Like many industries, manufacturing is short tens of thousands of workers, and with baby boomers retiring, it's getting worse. Does trimming cannabis really sound like a rewarding career path? Because we have precision machining jobs paying $70,000 to $80,000, and we have lots of those jobs available today. In the end, assuming this or another bill, similar bill, eventually moves forward, we simply ask that it provides a better understanding of testing and impairment and support and guidance for employers. We're not looking to fight social battles. We understand there's needs for cannabis. However, we need to make sure that employers have good guidance and good abilities to take care of their employees and ensure that they're not at risk themselves. So, Mr. Chair, committee members, I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Kalina, and I see the
So
representative.
if you see the running total, we have 1 for, 1 against.
And
That's what it sounds like.
Testifiers, please stick around in case the question.
That is what it sounds like so far for me.
Nathan Knoll, after Mr. Knoll is Michael Dobb, Rachel Jacobson, and.
Join me on Restream.
Mr. Knoll, please.
I sent you guys links.
And proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. My name is Nathan Noel. I come here today to voice my support for Minnesota recreational cannabis industry workers. That is why I support the labor peace language in House File 600. Labor peace agreements ensure that cannabis jobs be safe and well paid. I have lived in Minnesota my entire life and raising my 3-year-old and 8-year-old daughters in Minneapolis. I joined the UFCW in 2015 and was part of the inaugural class of cannabis workers for Local 1189. Officially, I'm the 5th cannabis worker to join the union. I work in one of the greenhouses here. I spend sunrise on Sunday mornings ensuring plants are fed and the environments are to spec to allow our crops to reach their maximum potential. Our team of 10 work every day to ensure the raw material for our patients is always in supply. We are fortunate to be somewhat isolated from COVID-19 as our secure facilities require masks, gloves, strict sanitation protocols, and temperature scans prior to entrance. While working, we are reasonably able to socially distance in greenhouses. Working for a physician-led organization that believes in its workers and the power of the plant we produce has been great for my family. I'm exceptionally fortunate for the opportunity to work with and for such amazing people in light-supplemented greenhouses that are warm and sunny 365 days a year to produce such an amazing plant. I support the cannabis industry because they help make sure my workplace is safe. At our greenhouse, we have a joint labor management board that meets quarterly to address health and safety issues. That board would not exist without the union, and I would not have that venue to talk about the health and safety concerns of my colleagues without a union. Cannabis is agriculture, and therefore has many safety concerns. The greenhouses require specific environmental conditions for cannabis plants to thrive. Workers can sometimes be exposed to unusual heat temperatures, strenuous working conditions, and hazardous cleaning agents between harvests. We are able to voice safety concerns at the Joint Labor Management Board meeting. Another common concern is ergonomics. My coworkers have had issues with being overburdened with repetitive packaging tasks. These tasks can lead to long-term injuries. We're able to bring up to the board, and workers are now given alternating tasks throughout the day to reduce the chance of workplace injuries. The Joint Labor Management Board allows workers to address health and safety concerns with management on a regular basis. I know the cannabis industry is a job generator, and I want those to be safe jobs. Because of my job in Canada,
Yeah, I got a
my
link on
family
my
and
phone. It says
cultivators,
Minnesota was live
these
now.
tasks House File
Minnesota
600
Wake and
today,
Bake.
and thank you
And I
for the
click on it
opportunity.
and it says,
Thank you, Mr. Noel. Next up is Michael Dobb. Mr. Dobb, please identify yourself for the record and proceed.
that'd be 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and.
So 2 for.
Committee members for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Michael Dowd. I'm a drug and substance use disorder policy advocate. I believe at this point in time, Minnesota sits at a crossroads. Cannabis legalization brings with it difficult legal and policy challenges. Although Minnesota partially decriminalized marijuana in 1976, the legalization movement never really gained much momentum. So the federal law criminalizes marijuana in a variety of different ways. The budding experiment to legalize marijuana has not withered on the vine. Legalization efforts have taken root nationally, spreading like a weed. As the National Conference on State Legislatures puts it, marijuana has lit up conversations and controversy across the country. It's a hotly contested and complicated issue for states to weed through, and no doubt will remain high on legislative agendas for the foreseeable future. I believe that Minnesota needs to be educated with the research and science that clearly establishes that there's a harm to public health caused by marijuana use. research and science do not support the widespread legalization and commercial sale of marijuana. I'm allied with a number of organizations that oppose the widespread legalization and commercial sale of marijuana as proposed in House File 600, and I'll hold with those that believe that further decriminalization beyond that which was accomplished in 1976 and expungement of certain convictions should strongly be considered. I believe that at today's hearing, we are likely to hear testimony about why marijuana should be legalized and commercialized, because it will more easily facilitate access by veterans. Veterans should be honored for their service to our country. We all want to help veterans. So marijuana legalization and commercial sale may actually do more harm than help. The belief that marijuana can be used to treat PTSD, for example, is limited to anecdotal reports from individuals with PTSD who say that the drug helps with their symptoms. There's been no randomized control trials, a necessary gold standard for determining efficacy. I testified a number of years ago before the FDA involving the efficacy and the use of a medical product, of an opioid, and it was a remarkable experience. And the fact that that's not being done and has not been done when it comes to marijuana is simply astonishing. Some veterans use marijuana to relieve symptoms of PTSD.
Mr. Dodd, could you please wrap up our 3 minutes? Your 3 minutes is up.
Yes, thank you. I'll wrap it up by saying to be balanced, overall drug policy should be used to reduce drug use and connect those who are suffering from substance use disorders with recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dodd. If you have more comments, you can submit them to the Travis Reese, our committee administrator, and we'll share with the committee. Appreciate your testimony. Next up, Rachel Jacobson. Ms. Jacobson, please identify yourself for the record and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Rachel Jacobson. As a resident of Prior Lake, I come here today to voice my support for the recreational cannabis industry in Minnesota that creates quality jobs. That is why I support the labor peace language in House File 600. Labor peace agreements ensure that these jobs will be well-paid, family-sustaining jobs. I have lived in Minnesota my entire life. I joined the UFCW in 2018 and worked in one of the retail medical cannabis dispensaries. It has been challenging working through the COVID-19 pandemic and interacting with the patients on a daily at the busiest location in the state. With the governor's executive order in place, we offer vestibule pickup instead of patients coming into the dispensary to pick up their cannabis products. We also offer curbside pickup where we bring the medication out to their vehicle, which can be tedious on cold days. As a patient care coordinator, I fill orders, dispense medication, and answer remaining questions patients may have. On a busy day, we see over 100 patients. We work 8-hour shifts with paid lunches. There are typically 3 patient care coordinators working at a time to guarantee breaks. I support labor peace agreements in the cannabis industry because it will lead to good jobs. I know that cannabis is a growing industry with the potential to create a lot of quality jobs here in Minnesota, jobs like mine that are good paying jobs. Through the union, we bargain for annual raises so that my income is sustainable and I have access to affordable health insurance. We have employees who have been working here since the medical cannabis program started in 2015 because there's an incentive to stay at this union job year after year. I believe that we have a very low turnover rate because we are union and have guaranteed wage increases and benefits compared to non-union workplaces. My employer recently changed the retail name of their locations to Green Goods. This says to me that employers are adjusting to the new landscape and getting ready for adult recreational legalization. As the industry grows, I want other workers to be able to join a union and have access to a collective bargaining agreement. Without a union, I would not have a voice in the workplace, and neither would my coworkers. My union has allowed me access to a job that provides a living wage, health and safety training, and a union benefits package. I want this for new recreational cannabis workers too. Please vote yes to pass House File 600 today, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobson. Next up is Ken Winters, PhD. And before Mr. Winters, Dr. Winters, the next three will be Marcus Sarkis, George Muto, and Jeremy Moen. And if I butcher your names, I so apologize. Mr. Winters, please, or Dr. Winters, please identify yourself.
Psychiatry at the University of Minnesota. I co-founded, along with Judson Bemis, an action group called Smart Approaches to Marijuana Minnesota. Our group does not support the commercialization of cannabis for adults, but we do favor the improvement of Minnesota's medical marijuana program and reviewing Minnesota's existing decriminalization laws. If one were to follow the science, it is my view that there is no health justification for commercializing the sale of cannabis to adults. There is now substantial evidence as to the negative effects of cannabis use on health and well-being, including risk for addiction, damage to the developing brain of adolescents, impaired driving, and elevated risk for mental illness. All of these risks are elevated when people are using higher intensity THC. There's now robust literature on that. As for the potential medical value of cannabis for veterans, I have three thoughts. My understanding of the research-based science is that a moderate degree of evidence exists for the medical value of cannabis for non-cancer related pain. But the evidence is very mixed as to the possible benefit of cannabis use for PTSD. And some studies have shown an increase in PTSD symptoms after cannabis use. If veterans are not getting sufficient access to the Minnesota medical marijuana program, then the program should be fixed. I do not see how it is logical or ethical to commercialize a product outside a medical structure in order to make it easier for anyone to use it as medicine. The Minnesota medical marijuana program should convene medical experts and provide an updated review of the latest science-based research on cannabis use as medicine for veterans. And the program's oversight group needs to address the problem of accessibility and affordability. Simply put, supporting this commercialization bill is a bad idea. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Winters. Mr. Harkis, please identify yourself for the record and proceed.
Peace. My name is Marcus Harkis. I'm a family man, writer, organizer, and social entrepreneur from North Minneapolis. I'm also the director of the Campaign for Full Legalization. For the past 7 years, I've studied the history of prohibition and the emerging legal cannabis industry. At 20 years old, I began smoking herb as a safer alternative to alcohol and to treat my post-traumatic stress from being excessively harassed by police in my youth and 20s. And I've never been a criminal. Police have pulled me over 70 times, racial profiling me 50 of those times in vehicles and on foot. I was once violently brutalized by Minneapolis cops along the curb on Plymouth Avenue during a blizzard. I once experienced being berated and sexually assaulted by a vicious female U of M cop who caught me and a woman peacefully smoking by the Mississippi River. As a Black man and a cannabis consumer for the past 22 years, I know that too many police officers are corruptly addicted to the war on drugs. Thousands of veterans have been victims of the drug war, including those like Jeremy who were discharged from military service over consumption of cannabis, a healing plant with no lethal dose. The most dangerous thing about cannabis is getting caught with it, because you can lose your freedom, lose your job, lose your housing, and even lose custody rights of your children. We all know about the prevalence of PTSD among veterans and the tragic fact that 22 veterans die by suicide every day in the USA because of it. Because of prohibition, veterans are not free to consume cannabis without risking their careers during active duty or their VA benefits in retirement. Dozens of Minnesota veterans have shared their testimonies with me of how THC has been the only substance to effectively treat their PTSD, including a good friend of mine who is a successful, nationally respected professional whose biggest secret is that smoking herb every night after work helps him relax, enjoy private fellowship, and endure his haunting trauma to help him sleep. As the grandson of two foreign war veterans who returned home with PTSD and became alcoholics and tobacco smokers, I've often wondered if cannabis had been legal and safely accessible then, if my grandfathers would have lived longer, healthier lives. Ironically, cannabis is an exit drug, not a so-called gateway drug. Trauma is the real gateway to drug addiction. We know that many veterans, like my extraordinary friend, are thriving partly because cannabis has helped increase the peace in their wounded hearts and minds, as it has with millions of civilians, including myself. Soldiers are men and women willing to make the ultimate sacrifice of their lives for our country. This is supposed to be a free country they defend, not a police state that disenfranchises us. It's time to end the drug war now. Prohibition is the problem, not cannabis. Please pass House File 600. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hargis. Next up is Dr. Real Muto, and I apologize. Doctor, please identify yourself for the record and proceed.
We're listening live to the Minnesota House Labor, Industry, Veterans, and Military Affairs Finance and Policy Committee.
We will come back to him, and if we're having technical difficulties.
I got it. Sorry.
Okay, that's
I
all right.
was
Go ahead.
thinking you were going to. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for this opportunity to testify on House File 600. I am Dr. George Relmuto. You've done very well pronouncing my name. Professor Emeritus of Psychiatry at the University of Minnesota. For a dozen years, I was the medical director of the state's psychiatric facility for children and adolescents in Roma. In that capacity, I treated adolescents who appeared to have severe schizophrenia, except their psychosis was initiated by high-potency cannabis, and remained in hospital for months, while non-cannabis patients with schizophrenia stayed in hospital for 1 to 2 weeks. I oppose opening up the state to recreational marijuana because of the difficulties of accessing evidence-based addiction services, and because veterans and adolescents and young people are uniquely vulnerable to addictive substances. Adolescents have no rules for the amount of the addictive substance they consume. They feel indestructible and are heavily influenced by society and peers. They often will oppose treatment even when family and teachers see the problem. Veterans, and this is from my reading of the psychiatric literature, who experience war situations that required high levels of vigilance. That's what makes them uniquely susceptible to post-traumatic stress disorder, and this illness can be a barrier to accept care. They are trained to suppress negative emotions to improve success in combat. Lack of access to their psychological understanding of themselves can be a barrier to accessing care. These developmental learned traits and illnesses for both young people and veterans are impediments to their perception and self-assessment of the problem of addiction and their engagement with treatment services. Adding a new addictive substance to our society without first robustly funding prevention, education, and early intervention is unethical. A review and revision of the medical cannabis program is necessary. Adding recreational cannabis as a method of decreasing the cost of medical cannabis creates an enormous set of harms to solve a narrow business issue. Thank you for your attention. I'll accept questions at the end.
Thank you, Doctor, for your testimony. Next up is Jeremy Mullen, and then the next three after that are Jeremy Sankey, Ryan Schmidt, Joanna Lester.
Again, thank you for listening with Daryl and Ed with the Wake and Bake crew and Minnesota Normal. We're listening live to the
Thank you,
Labor,
Mr.
Industry,
Chair.
Veterans, and Military Affairs Finance and Policy Committee,
I'm here
Minnesota
to,
State House.
testify on behalf of HF 600. I myself am a veteran, and I was removed from enlistment due to cannabis use. Throughout my military career, I had some issues with alcohol, and I switched to cannabis because I was actually less careless when I was using cannabis. My story is I was in basic training in December of 2000. Sorry. I was in basic training, and in December of 1997, I was put on Christmas leave to go home. I'm 42 years old, man. That's so quick. And it was Christmas Exodus leave from basic training. I was at Sand Hill, Fort Benning, Georgia. I got to home, and on the 29th of December, I was bringing my grandma home for Christmas at my parents' house in Cloquet, going down Highway 2. And in Floodwood, there was an old truck stop called Bud's Place, had a little cafe and stuff. And my grandma had just asked me to turn the radio up. Well, my grandma being a 30-year organ player in church, you know, I really didn't think she was going to ask me to turn up Guns N' Roses, but she did. And when I reached down, I turned it up, and I looked up, we ran into the ass end of a semi that was turning into Bud's. I'm going to make this quick because I got a few little points to make, but my grandma didn't make it to the hospital that day. And literally, when it comes right down to it, there are days I can't kick it out of my head. I usually always have a little bit of cannabis with me. And one puff, and I can go about whatever I'm doing. It gives my brain enough time to shut up, shut off, and go do what I can do. I can grow this in my backyard if I'm allowed. And I don't have to go out and I don't have to deal with the public if I'm having one of those anxiety out days. I could just sit there, stay at home, do what I need to do. Raise my kids, raise my family, and be who I need to be. Because some days there are those days where you don't want to go out in public because there's such a stigma between the cliques and communities that I don't agree with what you do, so I'm just going to sit here and be really loud about it. Well, that's okay. I don't care if people don't agree with it. That doesn't bug me one bit. But don't agree with it quieter. Because I don't agree with some things you do too. And that's part of society in general, you know. We have all these cliques in society and we all just have to learn to work together. Sometimes we have to learn to let some things go so we can use the better parts. That's how life is.
Mr. Mullen, can we please wrap up?
Yes, sir. That was basically, it helps me calm down. It helps me stay on an even keel. And I wish that everybody would just learn to watch their own bobber, you know, because sometimes everybody else just let them do what they do. You know,
Thank you, Mr. Mullen. And if you have more comments, you can certainly submit as well.
I'll be here. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Next up is Jeremy Sankey. Mr. Sankey, please identify yourself for the record and proceed.
Mr. Chair, committee members, thank you. Jeremy Sankey, founder of Minnesota Veterans for Cannabis. Over the last 5 years or so, we've spoken to or communicated with almost 15,000 veterans in the state of Minnesota who use cannabis for medicinal reasons. Some of those veterans, they'll use the state program, but a majority of them do not for two main reasons. One, the cost, and then two, the fact that they're asked to pay hundreds of dollars a month for cannabis when the VA obviously is still handing out pills for free every day. This is a quality of life issue for veterans. And to those that say cannabis doesn't help with PTSD, let me tell you, the number of 22 veterans a day would be a lot higher, a lot higher. Even though cannabis can help veterans immensely, people associate cannabis with crime. It's actually prohibition that creates the crime. If we were good at learning from history and we studied alcohol prohibition thoroughly and its unforeseen consequences, we would see that prohibition as the problem, not cannabis. Even though cannabis can help veterans immensely, some would say in the legal states, there's bad things going on. Well, I've been there. I've spoken with lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. And in my best Chicken Little impersonation, I'll say the sky has not fallen. Even though cannabis could help veterans immensely, people worry about the kids getting a hold of it. Well, the kids already get a hold of it now. I used to be concerned about kids getting a hold of it, but now I'm more concerned about what they're getting now rather than the fact they're getting it. A well-regulated, monitored, legal market helps out a lot of people with public health issues, especially when it comes to kids. Instead of getting tainted or counterfeit products, they're getting something that's regulated and monitored. In reference to something that was said earlier, we already have a recreational market in Minnesota. That's not going away. The one we have now is just be legal. We're just asking it to make it legal. And I would say, yeah, we make it legal, the cost of medical cannabis comes down, but that's already done in the medical community. I mean, in the pharmacy at Walgreens and CVS, you've got medications that are behind the counter and ones that are over the counter. The over the counter medications, you don't need a script for. It comes with directions. Use it yourself. We're asking the committee members to support House File 600 just like we do. We're asking you to support veterans. We're asking you to forget everything you've ever been told about cannabis, because most of it was a lie. If I was working in the addiction industry, obviously I would be against the legalization cannabis bill because I get paid by people being addicted to drugs. But that's not the case.
Wrap up?
Yes. Like I said, we're asking you guys to support this bill and to vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next up is Ryan Schmidt. Mr. Schmidt, please identify yourself for the record and proceed.
Mr. Chair, he emailed me and said he may have to jump off for a doctor's appointment. So he'll either submit something in writing or he'll sign up at the next committee stop. So it doesn't appear that he is here anymore.
Thank you, Mr. Reese. Next up is Joanna Lester. And after Ms. Lester will be Stephen Egan, Alex Miller, and Maren Schroeder. Ms. Lester, please identify yourself for the record.
There we go. Hi. Good afternoon, Chairman Eklund and committee members. My name is Johanna Lester. I'm a former research interviewer in public health and medicine at the University of Minnesota. I'm here to testify in opposition to the bill. In my job at the University of Minnesota, I was a member of AFSCME. What we need in our workforce is people who are educated and healthy. This bill does nothing to promote either. The so-called Labor Peace Agreement prohibits labor organizations and members from boycotts or picketing the cannabis production. This agreement means that cannabis workers have fewer labor rights. Even most essential workers in healthcare or education are not prohibited from striking or protesting. Why is this special treatment for the production of a recreational product? A healthcare professional who certifies qualifying medical conditions is prohibited from holding an economic interest in the manufacturer.
I don't want to talk over the witness, Daryl, but we can barely hear whatever you're trying to say.
Do legislators who vote on this issue own interest in the marijuana industry or receive money from its lobbyists? My brother was a disabled veteran. He came home a chain smoker and a schizophrenic. He died at 50. Cigarettes were highly available in the Army at that time. They were promoted. They've killed a lot of people. Veterans don't need access to more poison and a substance which alters the functioning of the mind. They need adequate medical and psychiatric care without undue hassle. They need it to be accessible and where they are. They need adequate rehabilitation and mental health care, not available to my brother even years ago. They don't need a drug which federally is not legal, not FDA approved, and is essentially experimental. It does not make sense to use vulnerable, wounded veterans as a medical experiment for the benefit of the marijuana industry. This bill is extensive. It obviously required many hours of preparation. In the past year, we've experienced over 480,000 cases of COVID-19 and over 6,000 deaths. As a state and a nation, we were unprepared for this pandemic.
You need to mellow
There was a
out.
lack of expertise and a lack
You
of
should come up here and lay
recognition
down. Come up here and lay
of
down.
the science, which
Lay down.
might help limit the pandemic.
Just lay down.
pandemic.
Yeah, good girl.
Given the gravity of our situation now, the real need to spend money and time on infrastructure, improving healthcare access, the importance of getting everyone vaccinated. Why is this bill, which is for recreation of a few at the expense of many of the rest of us, been given such priority? We need quality housing that people can afford.
Ms. Lester, can you please wrap up?
Sure. What I would like to know is why attention such as has been given to this bill is not been given to things like housing and transportation or even to potholes. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today.
Thank you for
Thank you,
joining us.
Lester.
It's Daryl and
Next up
Ed.
is Mr.
We're
Stephen
listening
Egan.
live to the Labor
Stephen,
Industry,
please.
Veterans, Military Affairs,
Identify
Finance
yourself for
Policy
record,
Committee
proceed.
from Minnesota State House.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Committee, for allowing me to speak. My name is Stephen Egan. I am a Minnesotan and a veteran. Currently, I'm out of state consulting in the cannabis industry, teaching other labs how to remediate residual content from their oils for medical use. I got out of the Army in 2015 and moved to Minnesota specifically because it was my home and they had a medical cannabis program. When I got out, I wasn't normal. I came out really bad off. My wife had to essentially ensure I brushed my teeth every day for the first 2 years of my ATS. As I became more familiar with cannabis use and got my dose corrected, the world for me began to change. Once I realized how beneficial this plant was, I wanted to give it to everybody. So I learned as much as I could as far as this plant is concerned, whether it be the cultivation or the extraction, and now I employ myself and others in this industry and support my family. Unfortunately, I cannot do it at home in Minnesota. I have to travel around the country, take myself and other veterans away from their families so they can provide for their families. This plant is therapeutic. It helps. It saves lives. For those of you that aren't veterans that were speaking on our behalf, thank you, but I'm telling you the plant works. Anecdotal evidence is much larger. Dr. Mashulman has been providing information for decades about the quality and the benefits of this plant. As far as jobs are concerned, sure, trimming isn't the funnest and it doesn't pay the best. However, I can tell you that there are people making excess of $150,000 a year as technicians within this industry, making quality products for patients and recreational users. There are entry-level jobs just like anywhere else, but there are C-level jobs in this industry as well. Supporting HF 600 is just the right thing to do. It's time that Minnesota gets on board and starts getting with the rest of the country and generating income and providing jobs for its people. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Egan. Next up is Alex Miller. Please, identify yourself for the record and proceed.
Hello, Mr. Chairman, committee members. My name is Alex Miller. I served 10 years in the Minnesota Army National Guard. I joined on February 16, 2011. I was involved in an incident in July of 2012, less than 6 months after returning home from getting my advanced individual training as a combat medic. In that accident, I broke 3 vertebrae, my T4, 5, and 6. They had 80% wedge fractures throughout, and daily I deal with excruciating back pain, debilitating back pain. This affected me for the last 10 years while I was in the military. They tell you to embrace the suck, and that's exactly what I did. I pushed through every ounce of pain to the point where I was breaking myself. About 3 years ago, at a particular low point, I was offered to try it as I was bedridden, and I had a little bit of a break before my next drill, and so I decided to try it, even though I was in the military at the time, and I was up and walking around the next day. Pain wasn't gone, but it helped big time. Over the course of that 10 years, I saw many civilian and military doctors for this pain, and the best that I was offered was painkillers or ibuprofen. I turned down painkillers because addiction wasn't something that I wanted to live with. And so I did ibuprofen, and to the point where it tore a hole in my stomach. I now have chronic acid reflux. I wake up in the middle of the night because I've aspirated, I've breathed in my stomach acid because of how bad this has made me. I now ETS'd in August 16th of 2020. Sorry. Since then, I have not taken ibuprofen once. I have not missed a day of work because of pain. My girlfriend says she feels like she got me back. And I just returned home from a trip from Colorado last night when I received this phone call to ask if I could speak here today, with the potential of moving out there, just so that I don't have to fear for my freedom in a state that says that I can't use a product that I can grow in my backyard. I just want to say that I'm very happy that I was asked to speak about this. This is something that I'm very passionate about. And closing up here, I just want to say thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Next up is Maren Schroeder. Please identify yourself for the record and proceed.
Chair Eklund and members of the committee, my name is Maren Schroeder, and I am the Policy Director for Sensible Change Minnesota, an organization that is working primarily to improve access to medical cannabis, prevent accidental drug overdoses, and reduce the harms of our inequitable criminal justice system. I am also a medical cannabis patient with PTSD, resulting after several years of domestic abuse and stalking. I'm also the daughter of an Army veteran and former Teamster. Thank you for letting me speak today. I began my advocacy work in 2014 with our sister organization, Sensible Minnesota. When Minnesota's medical cannabis program started up, we saw a huge need for patient advocates to help patients navigate the oftentimes complicated process of registering as a patient. In that work, which I led for 2 years, I spoke with countless veterans across the state facing severe PTSD and pain disorders who are stuck in a system that just doesn't work for them. HF 600 gives Minnesota an opportunity to right the wrongs of prohibition. Patients, including veterans with PTSD and chronic pain, who have been paying some of the highest prices in the country for medical cannabis, will have safer and more affordable access. We will also create thousands of good union jobs in the new industry. In the upper Midwest, Michigan created over 18,000 jobs, which is roughly equal to the number of auto repair mechanics in a state well known for its auto industry. Appointed legalization ignores the reality that hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans are already using cannabis, mixing contaminated products and giving arrests for their use. Veterans are forced to pay exorbitant prices for medical cannabis, compromise their freedom and safety purchasing from the illicit market, or take unsafe prescription opiates. Medical cannabis works. According to a 2019 report by the Minnesota Department of Health on PTSD and Minnesota's medical cannabis program, 76% of our Minnesota
We're making
PTSD
small comments, but we're listening to their testimony live,
benefit from medical
adding
cannabis.
very little comment.
And their
I'm
healthcare
saying
providers
intermittently, we are
Now it's high
live
time
with
Minnesota
this
leave our
committee.
failed prohibition policies in the past, and I want to thank you for the time
Okay.
today.
Thank you, Ms. Schroeder, for your testimony. We're at the end of the test fires. Majority Leader Winkler, before we go to any member comments, do you have any comments on what you've heard so far?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Just a couple of points. Mr. Kalina from the Precision Manufacturers, I think, first of all, I appreciate keeping the focus on labor and veterans here. Mr. Kalina from the Precision Manufacturers raised the question of safety-sensitive positions. And in fact, the bill as drafted permits employers who have safety-sensitive positions to include cannabis testing as part of the criteria for being able to work. So that concern is addressed in the bill after extensive work through legislators and listening to the concerns of the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce and others. So we do preserve the right for employers to test for cannabis when it's appropriate to do so. But like alcohol or prescription drugs, it is legal. It's a legal substance. So simply having it in your system, if it is not safety related, is not a grounds for termination or discipline in the workplace. So that is addressed. And a number of the comments related to opposition to the bill, I think, were focused on health in general and youth access. Those are real concerns and bear further conversation, particularly in health committees when we will get to those committees. But I do want to just say that the concerns about youth access, driving under the influence, and psychological conditions, those concerns are real. And all of those problems exist with our current criminalized prohibition approach to this issue. The bill that we are bringing forward today doesn't take those harms away, in fact, but it does help to address them by providing actual education standards and youth outreach with real information, by providing additional funding for substance use disorder and other kinds of treatment, and by providing additional training for law enforcement for impaired driving. So the impaired driving comment that was referenced is related to driving. In the workplace, it's a separate matter, and that is covered in the bill. So those were a few of the concerns raised. They are legitimate, but all of them are included with policy responses in this bill already.
Thank you, Majority Leader Winkler. Members, we have gotten okay for a few more minutes from House IT. We have several member questions, so please remember to keep it to this committee, which are Section 4 and Section 7 of the bill. Representative Bliss, to your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the author, Representative Winkler, it was brought up, and you just mentioned it again, the safety concerns on a job. I ran a large IT shop, which covered a lot of driving.
I was going to tell you that we were on mute, but I'd be saying that.
I don't know if that was considered safety work or not, but and it also goes with the impaired driving or any time you're working impaired. Right now, it's an objective test. I'm sorry, a subjective test. Or if a law enforcement officer, me as a boss, if I look at you and I think you're impaired, I can get you into a UA.
You do it.
If it comes
Otherwise,
back positive,
like,
you're
I'll relocate it.
considered guilty. If this becomes
again,
law,
it makes that
I
web
have no ability to
overnight.
test
It doesn't
anybody
kill the
in a
spider for me to
subjective-
use my toothbrush. I don't
objective
understand
matter.
your fucking whole concern.
That isn't
Really.
unfair
You think
to
I
the
don't know this?
person as well as the
It
employer.
happens like that
I
sometimes.
don't really
I've
care
had
what
to
you
deal
do
with
at
it
your house on the
before. You've
weekend.
never
If it
said
helps
anything
you with
before. I
payment,
don't know why
hey,
now,
power to you.
or if you just
As a
noticed
side note, I
now.
think we should
I
do
just
some more
noticed it's been hanging
medical
around. I've been watching it while I'm in the bathroom.
But what provisions in the
Bathroom is
bill
warm, I'm
provide
in
for
there a
better
lot.
testing? This is,
Okay.
I cannot support this until we get some sort of test similar to what we have for alcohol impairment with medical marijuana or with recreational marijuana. Do you have any idea of when that test might be available?
Very quick.
Mr. Chair, Representative Bliss, nice to meet you. I don't think we've ever actually met before. So first I would direct you to page 144 of the bill, which specifically says that an employer, this is 144.5, an employer may request or require an employee to undergo cannabis testing conducted by a testing laboratory if the employer has a reasonable suspicion that the employee is working under the influence of cannabis or is impaired by cannabis, has violated work rules, has sustained a personal injury, or is in a safety sensitive position.
Holy
So
Christ.
we actually do preserve exactly what you're described
Was that
in
you?
this bill in the
That wasn't me.
workplace.
It was?
The, alcohol is not directly applicable. What's
Okay.
unusual about alcohol of all substances
hope
that
they're
can
not
have you under the
trashing
influence is that there is a very
pots.
high correlation between your level of alcohol in the blood and your level of impairment. Those two things are very closely correlated in an objective manner, and that's why we can have something like a blood alcohol test, whether it's a breathalyzer at the side of the road or a blood test. So if you have prescription drugs in your system, if you are overly tired, if you have some other kind of impairment, none of those things meet the same standard of being testable like alcohol is, but they are all a basis or a cause for impairment. Cannabis is similar. You can be impaired, but a simple test is not going to, a sample test is not going to say if you're impaired. It has to be combined with some observed behavior that shows impairment or being under the influence. And that's what this bill provides for in the workplace.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a real quick rebuttal and then I'll move on. I disagree with you, Representative Winkler. If I think you're impaired and I get a UA and it comes back positive, and you're right, the level of THC will vary depending on how much you use. A light user would have a very light amount in this system and could be impaired, and a chronic user could have a whole bunch and not be impaired. I understand that. But at the same time, if I feel you're impaired, I get a UA and you come back positive, you're going to say, I did it this weekend. I wasn't impaired at work. I have no comeback to that. So that's just a comeback. I know what you're saying. I'm gonna let my colleagues have some more time. Thank you.
Representative Frederick.
We are live with the Minnesota
I'm sorry,
House
sorry,
Labor Industry Veterans Military Affairs Finance and Policy Committee.
I encourage members to actually read the bill on pages 144 and 145.
Representative Frederick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question that, it's something I think was already just addressed a little bit now. It talks about people on the job in the workforce in manufacturing. And I know people in the manufacturing field that have used cannabis and have gotten glowing reviews, have been some of their top level performers. And so this whole idea that if we legalize cannabis, somehow
So you can talk?
it's going to lead to
But-
everyone using
So
cannabis.
there he goes.
I don't
What? He's
understand.
using one of our
I also don't
pots?
understand
Yeah,
Great.
he's
why
dumping
people are
it, but
thinking
is he
that
gonna
just
bring it
because
back,
people
or
are
is he
using
throwing the
this in
whole
the
thing
workforce,
over?
that somehow it's
No,
gonna have a
they're
negative
filling them up and
effect
bringing them
on
over
the
there.
product.
They got the pickup
Because I
truck
don't
hooked up
think
to the
that
trailer.
is
If you look out here,
I think that was an
And then-
Well, I
case,
see that, but I didn't know
one by
that,
one
I just saw the
scenario,
one guy
saying
moving it
it's
over there and then he
another
didn't bring it back.
accurate.
That's all I
You
saw.
didn't see
And then
him bring
I didn't
it
see him
back.
bring
I
it
do have
back.
a
And then there
a
was another
question,
guy bringing it.
to the author.
okay.
I need
Some of the
those. I got
testimony that was
plans for
given today
those.
talks about labor rights.
If they toss one or two, if they break one or two
And
for the
we had a
roof, great.
They're
testifier
worth,
that identified as a
there's a cost involved with them. You can see them in the trailer. Do you see them in the trailer?
Asked me has
'Cause if
officially
you do
endorsed
that-
this bill.
no.
They have come out in support of this bill publicly. And I would like to ask the question, or at least give the author the opportunity to speak to whether or not this bill, since the question was raised, prevents union workers from striking at all, because that would be a pretty big deal to labor organizations if that was true.
Really clear.
Mr. Chair, Representative Frederick, a labor peace agreement essentially allows for a union and an employer to negotiate out the terms so that there will be no lockouts or strikes. It's a common practice, and it is only done pursuant to agreement with a labor organization.
Representative Frederick.
The last question was, do you think that this bill in any way takes away from the state's ability to work on any other project out there, whether it's infrastructure, housing, or anything at all?
Majority Leader Winkler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Frederick, I know that our members are busy working on housing and all of the other issues raised. We have a full plate, and I thank you for your time today.
Representative Berg.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe Mr. Kalina mentioned in his testimony that Minnesota doesn't need more jobs. I would push back on that we absolutely need more jobs, specifically jobs in the community that the prohibition of cannabis targets, which are our Black and brown community. Very easy as a white person to look at this issue and say we disagree with it. But my good friend Marcus Harkis testified on his personal experience as a Black man. I appreciate all the testifiers today, but I take exception to people testifying for communities they are not a part of. If you are not a veteran suffering from PTSD, you do not get to say whether or not this works for them. If you are not part of the BIPOC community, you don't get to say whether or not this issue affects them. I support this bill 100%. It is going to help people. It is going to create jobs. If it's well regulated and taxed, we get a revenue stream that we've never had before to support our other projects. And I thank the author for bringing this forward.
Majority Leader Winkler. Any comments or we move on? Representative Detmer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Winkler. Can you give us any type of study findings that marijuana has been proven to reduce PTSD? Is there any medical findings that tell you that it will help with PTSD? I haven't found it.
Majority Leader Winkler.
Mr. Chair, Representative Detmer, I think the testimony of Ms. Schroeder mentioned the fact that the Minnesota Department of Health has found that the use of cannabis by veterans has allowed them to significantly reduce reliance on opioids. And so I did not say that cannabis has been determined in a peer-reviewed study to reduce PTSD, but the evidence from veterans, the testimony from veterans has been that it is a better alternative for them than many other forms of treatment. And I think it's important to consider that, especially since it doesn't have any of the negative consequences for most of them, unless other conditions are present that other prescription drugs would have. So I would refer you to the studies that Ms. Schroeder raised and the testimony including from Mr. Miller. It does help according to the people who have it.
Okay, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So really, there is no scientific research out there now that will answer that it does help with PTSD. Now, I think most veterans know that several states in the United States have approved marijuana for medical or recreational use. Veterans should know that the federal law classifies marijuana as a Schedule I controlled substances, and it makes it illegal in the eyes of the federal government. So if we want to really change some things, it should be changed under the federal government. I think veterans participating in the state marijuana programs does not affect the ability or eligibility for VA benefits and your services. VA providers can and do discuss marijuana with the veterans as part of the comprehensive care planning, adjusting treatment plans as necessary. Some things that I'm a veteran. I'm a 25-year veteran. I have twin sons that are West Point graduates. They're currently serving 4 or 5 deployments. Veterans will not be denied VA benefits because of marijuana use. Veterans are encouraged to discuss marijuana use with their VA providers. VA health care providers will record marijuana use in the VA medical records in order to have the information available in treatment planning. As with all clinical information, this is part of confidential medical record, and protection under the patient privacy and confidential laws requires. VA clinicians may not recommend medical marijuana. Now, I support medical marijuana. That maybe as a state, we should be looking at maybe increasing the number of health issues that can be worked with medical marijuana, and then work with the federal government to recognize that. VA clinicians may not complete paperwork required for veterans and patients to participate in the state-approved marijuana programs. And the VA pharmacies may not fill prescriptions of medical marijuana. VA will not pay for medical marijuana prescriptions from any source. So those are the facts that veterans should know. That's why I think what we should be concentrating on is the federal VA and how we can get the medical prescriptions out to our veterans. Again, I don't think our society needs another controlling substance out there to be legalized. And you only have to look at what has happened in some other states, the problems they've had, talk to law enforcement, and so forth. Those are some things we need to be concerned about. But Representative Winkler, I really appreciate.
We need to be concerned about it at the state level, and he can only interact with the state level. He's not a federal legislator.
Than this right now.
We have so many businesses.
I
businesses that
apologize.
Are underwater right now. We're dealing with the COVID-19 issue. We need to get kids back in school. All these different things that we really should be working on as a legislature. But thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Detmer, and members, we have 4 minutes left, and we will vote on this bill today. So please be brief on your comments. Representative Poston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Winkler, first of all, I'm all for medical cannabis. I think it's great. I've heard a lot of very positive stories. But in my research, looking at states that have legalized recreation marijuana, a couple of things keep coming up. Number one, people think it's a tax bonanza for the state. And it turns out that it's really not a tax bonanza. In fact, the latest report
His
from Colorado Christian University
personal research.
says in Colorado, every dollar that comes in taxes, $4.50 go out on unintended consequences.
Please share that personal
The other
research.
thing that I hear over and over again is that people can't afford to buy the marijuana that's at the state dispensaries or the state licensed dispensaries. So the business is really being pushed right back at that guy on the street corner. In fact, it's been a bonanza for them because their prices have been able to increase. And as we've heard several testifiers here today, we don't know what's in that. That scares us. So I just kind of like your thoughts on those couple of things, please.
Representative Winkler.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Representative Poston. I think your second point is exactly why it makes sense to legalize. And this, Representative Detmer made the same point, which is the VA can't prescribe it, the VA can't pay for it. And so if you're a veteran who can find relief from cannabis, your only choice is to buy it on the street or to pay the very high cost of our medical program. It's expensive and it's hard to get qualified for, and veterans particularly have a barrier to getting into it. Adult use cannabis, legalizing it in Minnesota would permit veterans to get access to it through the commercial marketplace at a much cheaper cost than what is currently available through our medical program, and do so knowing the dose, clean it, knowing that it's regulated, knowing that it's safe. It is a much better alternative than the continued prohibition. As to the Colorado studies, there are a number of studies that have been put forward by organizations opposed to legalization. I would just say in Colorado that the support for legalization is higher now after almost 10 years of experience than it was when it first passed. People there like it. And if we were seeing major social problems that the data that you suggest have been happening, if that was actually happening, we wouldn't see support growing for legalized cannabis in Colorado. It works if it's done well. And what we're trying to do in this bill is do it the right way.
We're listening live to Minnesota House Labor, Industry, Veterans, and Military Affairs, Finance, and Policy Committee. We're getting ready for a vote.
I don't have it in front of me, but the report was, they went back to the lawmakers that voted yes in Colorado and asked them how they would vote today. And there were a lot of them that turned from yes to no. So, I don't know that the people in the state support it like you said. I'll try to find that and send it to you because I thought that was pretty interesting that they went back and asked those lawmakers what their vote would be today.
Thank you, Representative Poston. Representative Raleigh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the author, if I could direct your attention to 23.4. It's the listing of the various license types, so 23.4 down to 23.17. Is it the author's intention in the bill that that there will be a separation between growers, distributors, and retail, just like we have in alcohol regulation in Minnesota? So I'll ask the question succinctly. Would a grower also be able to be a distributor and a retail? Mr. Chair.
Representative Winkler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Raleigh, only if you are a micro business can you be fully vertically integrated. The goal is it's not like the 3-tier system for alcohol, in which nobody can be in any other category, but you cannot fully vertically integrate by having licenses that stack for all three unless you are a very small business.
Representative Raleigh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And then next, my question is on 87.15, and this is underneath the advertisement. Today, we heard a lot of testimony about the health benefits and the therapeutic benefits, and 87.15 says that there are limitations to all advertisements that contain unverified claims about the health or therapeutic benefits or effects of consuming cannabis or a cannabis product. And I'm wondering how we're going to be able to enforce that. And I'm looking at the tobacco advertising world that happened prior to the medical industry getting clamped down, because tobacco to begin with was talked about as being therapeutic. We go back to self-serving here, Raleigh cigarettes, and Ronald Reagan back in his Hollywood days would talk about the cool and therapeutic effects of smoking Raleigh lights. How are we going to think about that in 2021, and then what we're going to be able to do with that advertising in 2045? Mr. Chair.
Representative Raleigh, I appreciate the question. This is something that deals with the purview of the Commerce Committee. I'll allow Majority Leader Winkler to comment briefly on it.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, Representative Raleigh, that's why we have prohibitions in the bill on how advertisements can be made, including those targeting under the youth under the age of 21. We've learned the lesson in other states that we have to be very careful about advertising. We have to be careful about creating products that look like gummy bears or other things attractive to children. And while people can discuss and debate in a forum like this the health benefits of cannabis, we have to have children advertising on this for this substance, and that's why the bill is crafted the way it is.
Thank you, Majority Leader Winkler. We've got about 2 minutes left, members, and we will vote on this bill. Representative McDonald, briefly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Winkler, just curious, I have heard from several of my friends who are veterans who take some medical marijuana, and it helps them immensely. But the same is true, we've heard it today, the dispensaries are far and few between, it's expensive, and oftentimes I've heard of some of my friends that went down to the dispensary, they're closed. They took the drive all the way down to Annandale or Delano, they're closed. So why not fix what's broken now with our medical marijuana? And perhaps you probably get a hearing in the Senate, which you don't, you're not going to on this bill. It would actually really help our veterans by lowering the cost of medical marijuana and making the dispensaries a plethora throughout the Minnesota area, and really helping our veterans. So I'm curious as to why you didn't pursue that avenue instead of this particular bill. And then I have a real quick follow-up as well, Mr. Chair.
Majority Leader Winkler.
Mr. Chair, Representative McDonald, the bill does fix that in the medical program, including by adding the use of flour to the products that are available through the medical program. We have a separate bill on the medical program as well. But it's important to note, especially for veterans, that unless you have your own private insurance that's paying for it, and go see a doctor outside the VA system, you cannot get the prescription and you cannot get the payment that you need for cannabis. So, and in fact, so the point is that there are extra burdens for people who are relying on the VA system. And by creating an adult use marketplace, we would allow people to be able to safely access cannabis without going at a much cheaper rate than what we could ever create through our existing cannabis or our medical only cannabis program.
Representative McDonald, very quickly, please.
Mr. Chair, well, that's fine, Representative Winkler, but unfortunately, it's not going to get here in the Senate, so those good fixes for our veterans are not going to work. Lastly, Mr. Chair, Representative Winkler, you yourself and the VFL are banning flavored tobacco, but yet in your bill, you're allowing flavored cannabis. Isn't that an inconsistency and a contradictory?
Representative Winkler.
Mr. Chair, Representative McDonald, we are considering how a flavor ban could work with cannabis and expect to address that in the Health Committee when we get there.
And lastly, Mr. Chair.
Representative McDonald.
Thank you for your indulgences. Representative Winkler, in the bill, it prohibits you from making candy-type looking children's gummy bears or whatever. Gummies do seem to be a very popular thing. What kind of a shape will they take if you keep banning pretty much many, many other things that are capable of being made for gummy bears? What would they look like?
Mr. Chair, Representative McDonald, They could look like cubes.
Okay, well, due to time, I will no longer ask any questions, so Winkler, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative McDonald. Representative Winkler, final thoughts today?
Mr. Chair, I just appreciate the time the committee has devoted to this. I think for all the concerns that members of the public and advocacy organizations can raise about cannabis in our communities and how it affects people, the bottom line is our current policies are a failure. They do not help with any of the concerns that people have raised. And a better approach is a regulated, safe marketplace where people know what they get, where we're providing accurate information, and members of the public can be assured that if they're using cannabis and getting properly informed, that they're doing so safely. I ask for your support today.
Thank you, Majority Leader Winkler. Ms. Doyle, will you please take the roll on the bill?
Chair Eklund.
Yes.
Eklund, aye. Vice Chair Zhang, excused. Representative Detmer.
No.
Detmer, no. Representative McDonald.
No, sorry.
Donald, no. Representative Berg.
Aye.
Berg, aye. Representative Bliss.
No.
Bliss, no. Representative Edelson.
Aye.
Edelson, aye. Representative Frederick.
Aye.
Frederick, aye. Representative Greenman.
Aye.
Greenman, aye. Representative Nelson.
Aye.
Nelson, aye. Representative Poston.
No.
Poston, no. Representative Raleigh.
Raleigh's no.
Representative Raleigh, no. Representative Sundin.
Yes.
Sundin, aye. And there are 7 ayes, 5 nays.
That's
7
what I
ayes
have.
and 5 nays, the motion's carried, and the bill is on its way to its next committee. Members and staff, our next meeting is tomorrow, February 24th. We have 4 bills on the agenda. Any further comments or questions?
Excuse me, Daryl, you're
I
muted.
want to say.
But there you have it. It has passed out of the second committee in the state of Minnesota. Congratulations, Camille. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Daryl and I have been.
That's good news, huh?
It's very good news.
Yeah.
So I want to go ahead and tell the people, like Representative McDonald just stated, it's not going to get a hearing in the Senate, okay? Unless we put pressure on who? We need to put pressure on that Senate guy. What's his name? Do you know who we're talking about? We're talking about that Majority Leader Paul Gazelka, folks. Okay, there it is on our restream up there on our live. You should go ahead and be able to see that we need to go ahead and contact Paul Gazelka and tell him that we need him to go ahead and get this into the Senate. And he needs the pressure from the top down, folks. If you're a top down person, this is who you need to contact, because that's what our House minority person, Representative McDonald, just said in this meeting. He says, oh, it's not going to get a hearing in the Senate, so this is all a bunch of, waste of our time. Folks, this is not a waste of our time. Please contact Paul Gazelka at 651-296-4875 and tell him you support legalization for cannabis for adult use in Minnesota.
Thank you. Have a good day, everybody.
Daryl, you got anything to say before we go ahead and end our live stream?
We want you to put the phone number up there again.
For Paul Gazelka, or for we can also go from the governor. Hey, people, don't forget also, put pressure on everybody. Contact Tim Walz or Peggy Flanagan. The numbers are right there on the screen, 651-201-3400. Or if you're outstate, like I am, 1-800-657-3717. Or if you're needing to use Minnesota Relay, it is 1-800-627-3529, as you can read right there on the screen. Please contact either the governor and Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan. You can go ahead and contact your majority leader in the Senate, Paul Gazelka, because those are the people that seem to be opposed to this, because obviously our majority leader on the House side, that it would be Ryan Winkler, who has put forth HF 600. He's for this. So he does not need to be pressured. Now, today, moments ago, it has passed the second committee. This is historic in the state of Minnesota. Please, people, if you support us, join Sensible Minnesota. Contact them. Contact Minnesota Normal. Contact the Veterans for Cannabis in Minnesota. Go ahead and contact the Northern Minnesota Cannabis Group. We have many groups out here in Minnesota that if you want to go ahead and help, put support behind getting this passed, call them, join them. Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. We're all over the place, folks. Please find them, get contact. We can only share so much information, only so much of you doing this. If you see us, share this. Please help all of us out. This isn't about me. This is about everybody. This is about my kids, my grandkids, your grandkids, your neighbors, your parents, if they're still alive, because maybe they smoke pot, you don't even know it. Hey, come on, be honest with yourself. Who knows what a pot smoker looks like?